Hello, and welcome back on your mathematical journey. So this is the second part of a multi-part series looking at sort of overcoming your fear of factoring polynomials. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how to factor by grouping with greatest common factors. So that might be a little confusing, so I've gone ahead and put an example up here that we will walk it through with. So, right, we have this polynomial here, x cubed plus 3x squared plus 6x plus 18. And our goal is to factor this. Now, the first thing I'll point out is that grouping is very common for factoring polynomials that have 4 terms in them. So notice here, right, we do have, in fact, 4 terms in our polynomial. And so let's see how we do this. So the way this is going to work is as follows, right? Let's take the first 2 terms here, x cubed plus 3x squared. Now, if we think about the previous video, right, we're thinking what is the greatest common factor between these 2 terms? Well, right, there's no number here, so clearly there's no number component to our greatest common factor, unless you want to count the number 1, which is sort of a trivial one to consider. But both of these have, right, at least the power of x squared, right? So this one has an x times x. This one also has an x times x, but it also has times an additional x. So the factoring of the first 2 terms using the greatest common factor, right, we can factor out this x squared, and let's see what we're left with. Right, well, x cubed divided by x squared, right? Remember, we'll have x times x on the top and x times x on the bottom. We can cancel out 2 factors of x, so we're just left with 1 factor of x here. And then 3x squared divided by x squared. Well, the x squareds will cancel in that case, so we're just left with plus 3. Next, let's take a look at our second 2 terms, right? 6x plus 18. And now the natural follow-up question is, what is the greatest common factor of these 2 terms? Well, this one might be a little more straightforward and familiar, right? There's no x component in both of them, so there's going to be no variable component to our greatest common factor. But, right, both 6 and 18 are both divisible by 6. So we can go ahead and factor a 6 out of these 2, right? And when we factor a 6 out, right, 6x divided by 6 will just leave us with 1x or x, right? And 18 divided by 6 will be plus 3. Now, if we've done our factoring with grouping appropriately, assuming it is a polynomial that is meant to be factored, what we'll notice at this point is that notice that this x plus 3 exactly matches this x plus 3. And so now what we can do, and I might further clarify this, is we can actually say that this whole expression is actually just going to be equal to x squared plus 6, right? The x squared plus 6 times this quantity x plus 3. Now, if I lost you there, let me try and explain it this way, right? Let's pretend for a second I'm going to apply a substitution here. I'm going to say for a second, let's let the expression x plus 3, we're going to let that equal to a new variable y. Let's see if you can stick with me here. I'm going to take this x plus 3, and I'm going to replace each of these with just the variable y. So, right, we have x squared, right, times y, plus 6 times y. Well, at that point, right, given what we've all discussed, right, in our last 2 videos, right, clearly these 2 terms have now a greatest common factor of y. So, right, if we wanted to factor it in this form, we could just say that this is y times x squared plus 6. And this is where I'll point out that that's all that's happening here, right? Notice we have an x squared plus 6 and an x squared plus 6. But instead of having this variable y introduced here, right, since we substituted in y for the quantity x plus 3, we could go ahead and replace this y with x plus 3, and that's what we have down here. So I know that some students struggle to sort of comprehend how to get from this step to this step. So I think this will sometimes make it clearer for people. So, right, we can always double check this by performing our FOIL operation, right? First, outer, inner, last, right? X squared times x is x cubed, right? X squared times 3 is plus 3x squared, right? 6 times x is plus 6x. Then lastly, 6 times 3 is indeed 18. So it looks like it all checks out here, and this will be our final factoring. Anyway, I know this one can be a little tricky for people, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to ask. Otherwise, happy mathing and have a good day.